I'm Josh. I'm the founder of EHAB. So we are a weather risk management specialist. We do work mostly in construction, but now expanding to other sectors as well. And we've been working with Dave and Oracle for quite a while now, integrating our solution into Oracle Primavera, but also into PRA, one of the old school ones, and of course P6 as well. So Dave, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, sure. So yeah, I'm Dave, also based in the UK. I work as product manager, specifically the risk part of Oracle Primavera Cloud. So I've been kind of working in and around this space for close to 20 years now. Yeah, worked as a long time as a sales consultant, doing demos of our products. The last 4 years in this product manager role. If you don't know Oracle Primavera Cloud, it's like a newer cloud-only version that does the scheduling that Primavera P6 does, and like the risk that Primavera Risk Analysis did, as well as some other bits and pieces as well.
Thanks, Dave. So what we're going to cover today, folks, is actually first things first. We're going to jump onto EHAB, and I'm going to show you, if anyone is following along, how to set up a site, because that usually takes about 5 minutes to load in. Then obviously we're going to talk a little bit more about the weather risk and some of the approaches that we are recognizing people are using today. And then we'll go into a proper follow along from EHAB all the way into OPC, and then to run your QSRA as well. So I'll take the kind of the EHAB part. Dave will obviously take the OPC part, and feel free to ask questions as we go along. So actually the first thing I'll do is I'll stop sharing my screen, that particular screen anyway, and I will share the EHAB platform. So I don't know how many of you are actually following along, but we'll start off very briefly by saying once you land onto the EHAB platform, there's probably a purple bar at the top where you can claim some extra credits. I'd recommend you do that so that you've got extra credits for running through this process. And then if you are going to follow along and actually do the full integration, please message in the chat, because I will then, whilst Dave is talking, I will actually add extra credits to your account. So if you do genuinely want to do that, please message in the chat and I'll do that. So the only thing that we're going to do now before we properly get started is create a new site. And so it's literally as simple as naming your site. And I'll just, because I'm in Toronto right now, I can select my location. You can also drag the point around on the map if you want to. Or you can just drop it on the map as well. So if you're in the middle of Poland, for example, and then all you need to do is click create site. You do need to enter a name as well, actually. So yeah, once you've added your name, hit create site, and that will start to build out the historic data for your site. So if you are following along, recommend you do that now, because it will take about 5 minutes to load the rest of that in. But I'll then head back over to the slides, and we'll continue with the slides. And whilst our sites are loading in, we'll talk a little bit about what we're gonna kind of learn about today. So I think it's pretty obvious to everyone now. Maybe 5 years ago when we started, it was less obvious, but it's incredibly obvious that weather is getting worse, and that's being driven by global temperature change. And unfortunately, we're not really seeing a slowdown of that. So it seems to be getting worse. And just some pretty scary stats generally from the Met Office, but also it's not just temperature. Temperature drives lots of different things. I was just in LA. There's been obviously some very, very devastating wildfires there, but it's flood, it's storm, it's just heavy rainfall. There's lots of things that basically are leading to negative consequences for obviously people and also projects, businesses in general. And some of these charts on the screen, we don't have to go into detail on any of them, but all I'm trying to indicate is for every single metric that we track as EHAB in terms of project durations due to weather, likely downtime, like extreme disruptions, every single graph is moving in a very steep upwards trajectory. It doesn't really matter where you are on planet Earth. Of course, the effects are different in different places. Some things are going to be drought focused or flood focused, but yeah, unfortunately, the effects are getting worse. So that's why we built WeatherWise. which is basically the platform that we're going to be kind of looking at today and how we've integrated into awesome tools like OPC. If you've created an account, that you can utilize it for free to get started. And that's kind of what we're trying to make it as easy as possible to get up and running with. So I don't know, Dave, I'll kind of talk through this at a high level, and then maybe if you want to jump in on any of the points as we go through. But Dave and I, when we've been running these, we've kind of come up with these 5 different levels, where level 1 is doing completely nothing from a scheduling project perspective in terms of weather risk, which you'd be surprised some people still do, all the way up to level 5, which is basically taking a data-driven approach to weather probabilistic calendars and running a full QS array with that. So actually today we're going to be looking at level 5, and maybe this is a useful tool for you guys to think about where you are in terms of how you apply weather risk to your schedules. So we can share this afterwards as well, but I think it's a helpful set of levels. I would say most of the people, if you remember, Dave, when we surveyed them, were kind of level 3. Although we did have some level 5, we had some EHAB users who were level 5. But yeah, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I guess it depends on who you ask this question to, right? I think the fact that it was you got a lot of the people to that event, then maybe the sample is maybe slightly biased, and quite a lot that were at level 5. I think most people who are out there who are just putting their schedules together, one as GCs, 2 and 3 is definitely the most typical that we'd see. Yeah.
And I don't think we need to dwell too long on do nothing. I think that's pretty obvious, and I hope everyone understands why that's not such a good idea. Obviously, it is the quickest and simplest, though, so that is the advantage. I'm just going to flick through these, Dave, but jump in on any of these as you see fit. This is basically where you just add additional duration to your activities. Obviously, this is also potentially quick and simple, but probably often people are just doing it based on gut feel. And of course, you have to then remember how much time you've put into your activities as the schedule moves around. So you might end up with some quite confusing mental maths and gymnastics that you have to do to make that work. Do you want to jump in on this, Dave?
Yep, can do. I mean, this was kind of just showing a little example of that particular case, right? You've got a obviously very dumbed down example of a project here. You look on the left-hand side, inside of that construction element, that WBS, you've maybe got a handful of different activities, 6 different activities there. If you are padding inside of those specific activities, you've got a little blue weather portion, if you like, that is getting added to each of those individual activities, right? And as a result, your construction phase overall has got the padding to it as well. And you might think, okay, my project's gone from 12 months to 13 months overall. But as mentioned, if in reality you add a little bit of time to activity 1, subsequent activities will automatically get pushed out. And it might be that you get lucky and activity 1 isn't particularly impacted by weather, maybe because of the particular type of work that's happening and the season that you're at. But because you've already just added it to activity 1, you're automatically assuming that something is going to happen and activity 2 starts later, right? And in the reality with all risk, not just weather risk, you'll have instances where things go maybe a bit worse than you're expecting, and maybe some occasions things go a little bit better, right? But by putting the risk everywhere and kind of spreading it across the activities, you're layering it in there, so you're automatically pushing out your subsequent activities to activity 1, and therefore can't have a catch up. So I think best practice is definitely to move away from this and use some of the other steps that we're going to do, 3, 4, 5, and putting it in as separate activities with a bit more visibility and management of that.
Yeah, so level 3 is actually putting calendars onto your activities. And I think what this does ultimately do, a lot of people are going to be doing winter working calendars, or maybe they have a concrete and an earthworks calendar. It again is more realistic, and if your activities move around, then obviously when you reschedule, it's going to actually take the durations that are appropriate, or at least what you've put into the calendars. I think what many people do though is they might either look at just average weather data, or they are going to just have a gut feel. Okay, there's 1 day a week extra in winter, for example. So it's a better approach probably than padding, but it still isn't particularly accurate.
I think the other slight tricky part with this piece as well, Josh, is as you are doing more projects and move from location to location, a lot of schedulers tend to use the same project and copy across calendars from one to the next. And I think there's just a danger that, weather from a previous location was used by mistake, or, you aren't, it's an effort then to get that data for each new site, each new location, right?
Yeah, definitely. Then we've kind of made level 4 as is actually taking into account weather in your QSRA. So this is actually running a QSRA now as level 4, and again it's probably using either gut feel or average information or some set of data that you've kind of found somewhere. And this is still a better approach because of the nature of the probabilistic modeling that you'll be doing. So that's why we've kind of separated that out from level 3. It basically is unfortunately though, the disadvantage, I guess, is that you have to actually physically go and get weather data. I've seen people with some pretty ropey spreadsheets to kind of separate out and clean, and I know there's a lot of problems that comes with that from a time perspective. So probably often most people don't go and get the data and do it properly because it is quite onerous. Do you want to jump in on anything?
Yeah,
there,
I'm just for clarification, this is what tools like Primavera Risk Analysis and now Primavera Cloud do if you're doing it without having a data source like EHAB connecting into it, right? So you're going and creating risks for one for rain and one for wind, and then trying to work out which particular activities I need to connect them all to, which can get tricky, right? Especially if you then the whole complication of, well, which of those different weather risks, weather types they are really apply to which different activities, and that becomes quite a challenging process then as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then level 5 is basically taking a proper data-driven approach. Now, of course, EHAB is one option. I'm sure there are other ways that you could integrate that data into your calendars as well. Obviously, we're going to focus on level 5 today, and we're going to focus on the fact that key to this is probably that it's not just going to rely on deterministic assumptions or average weather. It's going to genuinely be location specific. And in our case, it includes trends from climate change, and I think it kind of can form part of a much broader, really accurate risk result. So I don't know, Dave, you have a final comment on that before we kind of dive into.
Yeah, I was going to add a comment. I thought maybe it just might be interesting, Josh, and I'd ask this group that are on here as well, right? I don't know if people can just key into the chat where they're at today. Might be of interest. If we leave this slide up a second, 1 through 5, where do you think you're at today? We maybe won't go quite as far as asking where people want to get to. Can maybe we leave that for the end of the call. Yeah. So we got a 3 to 5. I guess everyone can see the chat, right, and see each other's comments and stuff as well.
Should be able to, yeah.
So industry dependent from Niels. Yep. Carlos, depending on the project, level 3 or 4. Yeah, I was having a chat about this very conversation with someone else earlier today as well. I guess the both project type got mentioned there, and I guess in particular the type of contract, right, and how if this is I'm not sure if we've got owners or delivery team, GCs, general contractors on the group here. We've talked about this quite a lot, Josh, as well. I think a lot of it depends on what side of that fence you're sitting on as well, right? And as to what view you have of this. Yeah,
absolutely. I think from a project delivery perspective, and ignoring the commercials, you obviously want best visibility on the risk as possible, so that you can make that decision. But obviously, like you're saying, if it's a tiny project, it may not necessarily make sense to run a full QSRA. And yeah, there's a couple of slides in here about, you know, what is level 3 and 4, and what are the kind of maybe steps that are being taken. Like the one at the end there where it gives up, because I think yeah, it is quite complicated to get your own data and actually manipulate it properly.
No, this is really just talking through the steps that are typically taken. Like, you've got the project manager to create a schedule. They want to try and understand the impact of weather. So, you know, they might go and either create the weather calendars or weather risks. You need to input in either of those processes what is the probable lost working days, whether you're doing it, you know, deterministically with an exact number of days in a month or a range, doesn't matter. And, you know, you might start to like key in the values and figure out, oh, I don't really know, you know, how many days I'm going to lose on this activity in January. So you might start to go online, try to gather some weather data. You know, you might find a particular site where you can get some data, and then you spend quite a bit of time manipulating that in Excel, trying to figure it all out. And, you know, it just gets to the point where it's just a bit too hard, and, you know, end up giving up on it. Whereas on the next slide, I think, Josh, it just talks about the slight difference as to where you could get to, right? So you start off the same, you're creating the schedule, you want to understand the impact of weather. Now you would define the location, which hopefully some of you have already done as part of that initial setup in EHAB itself by clicking a place on the map or typing it in, connecting instead now to that data source. And then, you know, you'll see in a minute, Josh is about to show this, how you can set the thresholds based on that particular activity type, based on, you know, what are the local regulations or what work says. You know, I'm not going to do lifting work in cranes if it's wind speed higher than greater than 30 kilometers per hour, for example. And then we will automatically generate either the calendars, or in the case today, the risks with the lost working days based on your location and based on those thresholds. And then you can run the risk analysis and see what that really means, and, you know, confidently report on that, whether it's, you know, the owner doing this or the GC reporting up to the owner. So that's kind of the slightly different processes.
Yeah, no, and that's helpful, Dave, because I think now what we're going to go into is exactly that, where I want to focus on basically actually showing you what it looks like to create those rules in EHAB. So let me just get my my screen there. Sorry, I've lost my where I was working. So I'm going to go to my EHAB. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I can see it now.
So this was my site that I was going to build. So if you're following along today, folks, the thing I'd recommend doing, and I don't know that anyone has messaged in the chat to ask for extra credits, but you'll be able to follow along for this first bit at the very least with your initial credits that you started with. So across the top, you can imagine there's different reports, different things. You know, we're not going to go into detail on all of this, because we're going to go straight to the risk integrations tab, which is obviously what we want to do today to get that level 5. And we've tried to make it so that everything is a really simple step-by-step guide. So the first thing is to select a site. And obviously we've just created our site. I've got many sites. I'm going to just go ahead and grab one of these Canadian sites that I've got. And so I've done step 1. I now need to do step 2, although I've already done it before, but we're going to do it again together. And this is the really critical step that Dave was just talking about, which is, you know, traditionally people might say winter working calendar or rain calendar, or it's focused more on the weather type itself. But what we want to do in EHAB to make it a more granular analysis is we actually want to build rules that are relevant to the activity types themselves. Because as you can see from the kind of the colorful charts on the right hand side, without going into exact detail on every single category, you can clearly see that my mitigated concrete has a very different risk profile to my earthworks, which even has a different one to cranes and lifting, etc. So let's just look at the asphalt for a second. What this graph is telling me is that based on these collection of rules, in January, for example, I'm going to have 78% probability of downtime. which from a working days, just assuming a 5-day calendar is 18 days. Now, you might say that this rule is wrong, or it's too sensitive or not sensitive enough. And so the beauty of kind of the way that we've set this platform up is I can just quickly apply this rule, change it. Bear in mind, this is Ottawa, so 0 degrees looks like it's pretty chilly there, and you can see that the risk is immediately reflected. Or maybe I go -30, and we're going to completely remove the risk from that chart. So we give you a default set of rules, and those default rules are based on a lot of British standards and also expert interviews with clients. But we always recommend you guys to create your own rules, or at least review them, so that you're confident with, because it's very important. This setup step that we're doing now flows all the way through into the results that you're going to get from OPC and the QS array run that you do. So actually, each activity type here that we look at and select, this will become a probabilistic calendar in OPC. And so it's really fundamental that you get this right. Well, or at least you review it, because there was, thresholds here will flow through. So that's step 2. Now step 3 is import a plan. So it's really as simple as, I'm just going to grab one of my demo plans here. Where is it? I've got my sample plan. So sample test road project, that's good enough. And the process of importing the plan, the real benefit of doing this is you can unlock all of lots of other reports within the system by uploading the plan. We're actually about to launch a feature where you don't need to upload your plan, and you can just get the calendars and bring them straight to OPC. But for now, the key workflow is I need to import my plan, and then the final step before we can unlock and start doing the actual OPC integration is assigning categories. So if you ever encounter this error message, you just need to click manual categorization, wait for the activities to load, and then go back to the automatic categorization. So really the point of the automatic categorization is that I can find and look at any activity codes that are already on the plan. In this case, I've got a number of existing activities, and I can then match them to the activities we were just looking at, the activity types we were just looking at. So I'll just do a couple as an example, because we're not going to go through the process entirely here. But you can see basically I'm selecting based on what is the code type, and I can then click apply. And what this then is going to do is match all of the activities in the plan that I selected based on the selections I just made. So now we've got 3 categories in use on the right hand side, and that's been assigned to 3 activities in total. And so now I'll hand over to Dave in just a second, but all we need to then do is select the risk software. So we're going to go Oracle Primavera Cloud, and then there's going to be a video here. I just need to update it, but you can then generate the calendars and pull all this data into OPC. But the key thing to remember is whatever you've selected on this screen, so cables, cladding, etc., there's now going to be those calendars associated to those activities. All right, Dave, do you want to share your screen and take it away and show the rest of the integration?
Sure. You see my screen?
Not yet. Now we are.
Yeah. So here I'm inside of Primavera Cloud. I'm inside of a particular project. I've come to the activities page inside of the schedule app. I'm going to be, spend a bit of time in the risk register and risk analysis of the risk app as well. But this is how you get to them. So this is a schedule that I could have either created directly here in Primavera Cloud, or I could have imported from P6 or connected directly to P6. Josh has just shown a technique for mapping your codes. This is activity codes I'm talking about here to the weather categories. Another approach is I can actually create a code that matches that category exactly, right? So I've got in here, I've just called it EHAB weather. You can see alongside my activities, I've just got a bit of coloring on here to help them stand out a little. I've got a wind farm in this particular case where I've got a number of different turbines. I've got transportation, installation of the blades and testing for each turbine, for example. And I've just added a curtain on here to show when is the key winter period, which is just no more than a visualization of a piece of the Gantt in here. So this is my my activities page. I'm going to just pop up my risk register into another tab. Just going to keep the activities page open for a moment. So you can see at the minute, I've got no risks here in the risk register. So this is where, the typical process would be people would create a risk for wind, create one for rain, etc., and then have to do all the mapping. But instead of that, so I'm just in the same place where Josh was a moment ago. I would grab Oracle Primavera Cloud and I would say generate the calendar. I should have pointed out here that I've just selected, there's a whole load of different categories. Josh had some of them up. I've got some different ones here. These are basically just the particular ones that I've used that match, the code. What's six of them in this particular case. Generate that calendar. So it's basically, for those 6 categories, I get a message here to say that export is initiated. I can now download this this file. You can see it's exactly the same as the one I did in a little test. I am in risk after all. And then that is in exactly the format where you can import it. So we've got in Excel, you can create an import template and then do the import. So the work that we've done together is to, I'm in the wrong folder here, just make sure that we've got the why did that not open? Oh, I think it's just because I've got it still open in Excel. Yeah. That's what the import file looks like. Maybe I should have showed that quickly. Yeah, I found quite a lot since we moved to SharePoint. The ability to share stuff is completely dependent on if it's open on your. I'm sure we never used to get that before we moved to SharePoint. But here I've got a number of risks that are now added into the risk register, 6 in this particular case. As you can see, as we mentioned, the risks aren't cold, rain and wind, etc. Right? They're things like site clearance and roofing. If I click on any of these, so we have basically created the risks, and we've created all of this this data in here. For example, so for April of 2025, somewhere between 0 and 4 days, triangular distribution. A lot more downtime in Jan 2026. This is the data that people would be typically trying to estimate and input themselves. But it's now data driven based on at your site. We've got this little feature in here as well. Now it takes a little bit, it's actually running a mini Monte Carlo simulation at this point as well. It has just completed. Let me just show it. So this is showing you, what that, I think I was on the roofing one. Yeah, roofing looks like. If I jump forward to next year in particular, I've got a full year. The darker coloring here in Jan, Feb, and December in particular, you can see I'm 50 to 75% of the time I'm going to be down. So it's like a visual way of looking at that calendar as well. And you can get a feel, and this can be useful if you're helping explain to others in particular. What does that mean when you run a risk analysis? You imagine you've got an activity that is, starting on the 11th of May and it's 5 days. Well, now you're suddenly going to have on one iteration, at least the 13th blanked out. So it would move over to the next week, right? This is all that Monte Carlo simulation is doing based on those risks that we've now generated in a data-driven manner. This will impact my my simulation. And there's doing the connection, right? So I've got just a slightly different view here where I've got the activities grouped by categories. When you're assigning risks to activities, you can either be here in the risk register and go to the impacted activities and assign them. Mine were actually in the Excel import file as well, just why they're already there. Or you can do it from here. So I could, sort by roofing. I could quickly grab all of these activities that I've got categorized under roofing, and I could say I want to apply a particular risk, and it's the roofing risk, right? I've already got it on in this case, as we saw. But this approach, I think, makes it a lot easier to make sure you've got the right risks on the correct activities. And then, it makes the steps ahead of running a risk analysis a lot simpler. Let me just make sure. I think that is all good. So obviously we're here looking at just weather, but if you had your traditional risks, your threats and opportunities in your risk register, these weather risks could be just getting imported and added. It's like an additional layer on top of your threats and opportunities as well.
There's a question in the chat here, Dave. So Niels asks, just out of curiosity, why did you opt for distribution over percentage?
Yep. Good question, Niels. I guess predominantly because of the way that we've got that data coming in from EHAB. I don't think there's any reason, Josh, why we couldn't get it the other way around. Neither though is there. We've kind of maybe got a first pass of this integration, this ability set up to give those values in ranges based on the one method. But it absolutely could be set up in a way to give both. I guess we'd need to make that an option on the export file then, though, Josh, right? But yeah. And then if you're familiar with risk analysis, which I'm hoping most people are, because I wasn't planning on getting into this in a huge amount of detail here, but this is showing me that the project was originally due to finish. Let me just flip back. My project right from the very outset was due to start the 1st of April, finish the 19th of October. I can see, this is my deterministic date, the 19th of October, and I can see, the different amounts of delay that I might get due to weather in this particular case, right? And I've got things like my P10, P50, and P90 lines on here. My P90 being out at 5th of November, which would be, 13 days of contingency in this particular case. And I can look at things like my risk removal impact to see which of those different risks, which are activity types, I guess, really in this particular case, having the most impact, right? It's that site clearance ahead of the roofing that is having the biggest impact. And one of the things, that's maybe quite nice here, right? I've got this is the project we've just been looking at. I could do a quick test, what if I was to do that particular project with a different start, right? If you have got some flexibility. I think if I shift the timing of it, for example, so I think we were starting in April. If instead of starting in April, we were to go out to Jan, for example. So when you're creating a copy like this, a copy from an existing project, select which project, then ask, which of those different things do you want to bring across? So I can bring all the schedule and all the risks, and just have another version of that project. Nice, easy way to do a little bit of what if analysis. I think it's just opened it. So the risk register will be populated with exactly the same risks. The schedule will be in there as well, so I can still see the same, roofing, all the different activities. Obviously, the position of the activities will be 6-7 months later in here now. And we've got pretty quickly another what if version of just shifting the schedule out a little bit, shifting that start time. And what does that mean? So get my notification, the risk analysis is just completed. And we can see in this particular case, I'm in particular looking at the difference between my deterministic date and my P90 date, which is this pessimistic contingency here. I can see in this particular case is 38 days. In the one that I ran previously, we could see that pessimistic contingency, the amount of allowance that you should be putting in for weather was 13 days, right? So you can see big differences from just shifting the start time in this particular case, right? Exactly the same schedule, exactly the same risks in the risk register. Just obviously, they've got different amounts of downtime depending on the period that they're operating in.
I mean, it's pretty simple, isn't it, Dave? That's the thing. It's
yeah, I think once you've got get the connection into EHAB, you set your site, I heard you talking about the thresholds in particular, Josh. An interesting thought that went through my head. And, you know, you're saying that people should really look at those thresholds and maybe refine them. You know, the situation where most people are at, I think taking the default thresholds is even going to be an improvement on where people are at today in most cases, right? I know a lot of the time we get people asking things like, you know, can I have a beta-pert shaped distribution rather than a triangle one and things like that, right? I mean, I think it's kind of down in the weeds, right, with where people are at. If people today are either just adding on a little bit of time per activity or, you know, trying to go away and get some data into Excel, I think the approach that we've got here, even if it's the default thresholds, it's going to be a huge step up from where most people are at, right? So I think, you know, as we had with the slides, right, there's different levels of maturity and improving. Taking those categories with the defaults, I would have thought for nearly everyone out there is going to be a big improvement, and then absolutely they could think about refining them if there's debates over that later, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, we're also trying to refine things so that, because I think one question we get asked is about multi-day impact for rainfall, or, you know, wind speeds at heights, and those are all things that are going to be launched in the platform pretty soon. But as you said, when the baseline you're starting from is already maybe level 3, for example, those are things that are kind of edge cases or of course improvements that we want to make. But yeah, it's all about maybe baby steps.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm sure you're going to keep wanting improving EHAB. We're going to keep wanting improving the risk analysis. I think both things are just going to get better than where they are for sure. It's where we should be striving. Absolutely.
That there wasn't anyone who was necessarily following along on this session, but if you do want me to credit your account and you can test the OPC integration if you're an OPC user, then please let me know. Or if you want me to set you up on a demo account for EHAB, and of course, assuming that you have access to OPC. I don't know, Dave, but yeah, then just let me know in the chat, guys. But does anyone have any questions or any like thoughts or anything that they were kind of keen to maybe go over again or discuss? So we've got about 5 minutes left of the session. And what were the questions, Dave, we wanted to ask these guys? Whether there was any change in the type of maturity?
Yeah, I guess we just asked at the start, didn't we, about you know, where people think they're at today. You know, do people kind of think that you know, they'd like to strive for a higher level, right? Or, you know, maybe we're interested to get a feel for how easy do they think this is? Do they think this is there's obstacles for why they would not take this type of approach? Would be interesting. Or you know, is this a place that people can go? Yeah. I've just out of interest, I just put a program on here. It's no more than, you know, the 2 different projects. The first one I ran through and the second one I ran through, just a slightly different way of looking at the data as well, right? It's filtered to just look at the start and the finish milestones. And you can see, for example, I've got one of the things I can do as well here in the bars. I can show the finish date, and I can also add an additional, I say bar, it will be a bar if it wasn't a milestone. In case of a milestone, it's just a diamond, but it's showing that pessimistic finish on here as well, right? So you can certainly see for the first project, for example, how the slip from the 19th of October to the 5th of November is relatively small. You can see a much bigger slip, for example, in this case, where, you know, exactly the same project, same schedule, same activities, just where they happen to land in the bad weather periods, right?
I think that sort of visual stuff is definitely helpful. Because can you do the same with schedule as well, Dave, or is it just with risk?
Do the same types
do
of
that
views,
sort of
mean,
same comparison?
Yeah, no, well, so this is a schedule view. This is an activities view. I've just got it filtered specifically for the milestones, and in particular, just showing how that finish milestone in this. So I created a program. So I was doing this a little bit, Josh, as you were chatting. So I created a program just by going to add program, which was no more than grabbing the two different projects together into the program so that you can view the two projects side by side. If I was to turn off the filter in here, for example, sorry. This is the whole schedule that's in here for both of them together, right? And you can see activity by activity. You can see, the darker red, how it's slipping further and further out because of the weather risk, right? And you can see, less slippage. This is the second project with the different finish start date, sorry. And this was the first project, but just by putting that filter on for the milestones, it lets me quickly jump to, the key phases. And I've just got a start and a finish milestone. It could be different phases of the project as well, but it just helps me kind of see at a glance, the size of the difference, much more slip in this version of the project than this one, based on the different time of year that it's running, right? I see Carlos is typing, but he's either got a very big question or, yeah, okay, here we go. From my experience, it's difficult to get from the execution team the weather threshold criteria for some execution works.
Yes, I have, Carlos. It's a tough one because probably people don't necessarily always know either. So one of the things we've tried to do on the platform is below the where the weather rules section is, there is like the Beaufort scale, wind and rain and snow intensity scales. Temperature's a bit of a more easy one because often it's, is it above or below freezing, or what are the thresholds that are specified on the on the material that I'm applying. And often wind speeds are a little bit easier because it's, the manufacturer, the crane manufacturer literally describes what wind speeds and what loads that you can utilize, which is probably why, Dave, to your point, the default thresholds are a pretty good starting point because they are based on generally British standards. But yeah, thanks, Niels. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Carlos. This is why this should be a piece of work that kind of happens at maybe an organizational level where people can engage, multiple people can engage. And yeah, of course, I think Niels raised this point as well, that depending on the industry, there's going to be more, in offshore, clearly weather is like the biggest risk. And so therefore the sensitivity to getting those thresholds right is going to be much higher. But one thing we've encountered recently, which is why I was talking about the multi-day impact from rainfall, if you're, building or doing earthworks on a clay soil versus on chalk versus on, something harder and gravelier or something, then 1 day of rainfall, the same amount of rain, but in 3 different soil types can have, a 1, a 2, or a 3-day impact, depending on basically the soil type. So there is that other factor to kind of contend with as well. I don't know, Dave, do you have any final comments or any questions for anyone, or does anyone else have any questions? Approaching time.
Yeah, I've not got anything too much. Before I kind of saw EHAB and the way it worked and doing it by category, we would absolutely be advocating to customers to, put in a risk for rain, put in a risk for wind, etc. And, certainly one of the challenges of doing that approach, apart from getting the data and everything else that we talked about, is you might have typically rain and wind tend to come together, right? And if you put them as 2 different risks in the risk register, you might have rain is simulated on Monday as a down day and wind is on Tuesday, and you might ultimately end up with greater risk in there, for example, than is really the case. So, the thing that kind of struck me when I first saw your approach with EHAB is by taking it as a activity type and setting those thresholds, that's all taken into account of in generating that data from your perspective. So, it kind of avoids some of the things that were, trickier, definitely trying to do it the way traditionally it's been done in risk tools.
Yeah, and we're refining that approach all the time. So I think if anyone has any feedback on how that approach works or any thoughts on that, then please just reach out to us. I will be sending the recording to all of you, and of course to all the other folks who registered. And if you do want to speak to me or Dave about anything that we've talked about today, just let us know. It'll be in the email, the contact details. So thanks so much, everyone. I'm going to stay on for another couple of minutes, but this is the end now. So yeah, really appreciate your time, and yeah, good luck with all your scheduling and risk modeling on your projects.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Brilliant.
everyone.
Yep. Thanks
Cheers.
all. Cheers. Bye-bye.